Hello and welcome to No Wrong Choices, a podcast about the adventures of life that explores the career journeys of inspiring and interesting people. I'm Larry Samuel, soon to be joined by the other fellas, Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. For those who might be joining us for the first time, and for anyone else who hasn't done this yet, please support us by following No Wrong Choices on your podcasting platform of choice and by giving us a 5-star rating. We also ask that you join our community by following along on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and now X by searching for the No Wrong Choices podcast. You can also connect with us at NoWrongChoices.com. This episode features the professional guitarist and teacher Gaurav Bali. Gaurav is a very interesting guy who's made a career in the music industry, and Tushar has a long history with Gaurav, so you are, Tushar, once again, the perfect person to set up this conversation.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I grew up with Gaurav. Our families have known each other forever, and yeah, I've known Gaurav since he pretty much picked up the guitar and started playing back in the day. It's odd, too, because he and I have a very similar background. Not that I'm a musician by any stretch, not like him, but the idea that we went into non-traditional careers for immigrant kids. Like, a lot of immigrant families, you'll see that when they want their kids to go on to careers where they make a lot of money, not where they basically starve and live at home, which is what the two of us did when we were growing up, trust me. It'll be interesting to hear, what is it like to be... Not only to have an unconventional career that's outside of the norm to begin with, but one where you grow up in an immigrant household where sometimes that type of a career is looked down upon, where it's not traditional. But two, how do you make it work in such an atmosphere where success is extremely, extremely rare? Extremely rare. And you really have to put in your time and pay your dues to make that work.
Yeah, that's perfectly said, T. I mean, this is a tough path. I'm a musician. I played drums for about 25, 30 years. Not that I ever had aspirations of being a professional player, but I know the dedication and perseverance that it takes to make any kind of headway in this industry, and it's a challenge. You have to constant hours of practice and shredding and learning and growing and finding your sound. I mean, that is all while you're trying to put food on the table. I mean, let's be real,
Yep.
So this is... an artist's life is never usually an easy one. Some people get lucky and it is, but I'm excited to hear what his story is, because usually an artist's life is about piecing together a lot of things in your life to make it work so that you can become successful. But ultimately, I'm imagining this is about him being a great player and being a great guy to work with, because that's what we seem to find is these successful people. Those are the common traits.
Absolutely. And for me, as a business person, as somebody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, knowing that he is, gradually pivoting towards, a school of rock, so to speak, it's going to be fascinating to learn about how he is expanding that, how he is growing that, how he's setting it up. So with that, here is Gaurav Bali. Now joining No Wrong Choices is the guitarist, songwriter, and educator who was recently referred to as a rising star by the Nashville Voyager, Gaurav Bali. Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us.
How you doing, guys? Thanks for having me.
Very, very well, thank you. And I think before we get too far into the conversation, we like to let our guests set things up for us. So, Gaurav, in your own words, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Gaurav Bali. I am a guitarist and guitar teacher from the Northeast, from the New Jersey area, where Mr. Tushar is from as well. We've known each other a very long time, I've been playing since I was about 10 years old, and that culminated in me starting to actually teach for my teacher in New Jersey when I was about 18. So I've been doing that 30 years, which I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true. And then for 15 years, I was in an original rock band from New York, which had a few record deals and made a bunch of albums, got to do some cool touring, meet some cool people, play some cool venues, and live out, a few of the things that we saw on MTV growing up in the 1980s and 90s.
Awesome.
And then I left that project in, I think, fall of 2014. And then I actually ended up moving to Nashville for about 7 years, where I played with a few country artists, a great event band, and started kind of teaching again. And basically kind of decided that the second half of my life, if you will, the musical portion was going to be probably less traveling and performing and more just concentrating on teaching, and the goal of kind of opening a school and even doing, some guitar courses and things like that. So basically I've been back home here in the Northeast since last November, and I've just been focused 100% on teaching. So I have about 27 students that I do online, and I'm just kind of planning, the next step, which is, what you do these days, YouTube channel and courses, and hopefully opening a school and all that kind of stuff. So that's basically, from age 10 to today.
And that's it. That's the podcast. We're done.
Have a good day, Gaurav.
Thank you.
All right,
Goodbye.
Cool. I got a student.
All right, so Gaurav, I mean, obviously we are the children of immigrants, you and I. So typically our parents did not want us to go into the way of, let's say, entertainment. So you're a musician. I went into the realm of sports media and then into news media. So we did not go. We have not gone the traditional routes, right? So for those of you out there, most immigrant parents who come to America want their kids to go, let's say, into like the big four careers. They want them to go into, let's say, like law, medicine, business, and then let's say like engineering. So Gaurav, my first question to you is, how did your parents let you get away with this?
Well, who says they have?
Right.
No. My dad's side of the family is very musical. My grandfather actually, a lot of people don't believe me when I tell them this, but my granddad was actually a musician. Played sitar. He conducted the orchestra on the radio in India a while back. I have pictures of him doing it here that
wow.
I have him framed and all that stuff. So I think my dad in particular saw that his dad had to sort of give up on that to do the, like Tushar, what you were saying, the get married, have kids, right, the whole thing. And he saw that he didn't get to do what he wanted. And I think that a lot of people don't know probably had to do with why my dad has been really supportive. My mom also, of course. So the direct answer to your question is, of course, in the beginning, they were encouraging it as a hobby. They weren't thrilled in the beginning when I said, this is just what I want to try to do with my life. Because, of course, it's so difficult. And like you said, you and I are 0 for everything as far as the immigrant plan.
Right, exactly.
I literally have a hat that says black sheep that I wear all the time, or brown sheep, if you will, for us. But I think that once they saw how serious I was, and I guess to a certain extent, they saw that I was possibly good enough to actually do it for a career after a certain point. And I think that's when, kind of, especially my dad sort of made a decision of, okay, I can either hinder this or I can support it. I can help it. So luckily for me, he decided that he was actually going to be super, super supportive. I don't know if you remember, Tushar, in the house that my parents had previous to the apartment that they're in now. My dad actually took my college money and built me a recording studio.
I do remember this. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had a little project studio, and it was like a real studio. It wasn't just like, it's a basement, and I bought him, a 4-track recorder and a microphone. Like, literally, these father and son contractors came into our basement and built a shell within the basement, like, acoustically designed with raised floors for wiring, separate control room and studio with the window and the whole thing. It was like a real little baby studio that actually, that's how I learned how to record, how to write. The band that I mentioned I was in from New York, we actually did all of our writing and demoing for our first album. We actually recorded our first album down there. When we got our first record deal, they flew in a producer from England and a local engineer, and the engineer brought in all his stuff. This is long enough ago when Pro Tools was in its infancy. So this would have been like 2000, so he brought this Mondo Pro Tools rig into the basement, and we made our first record down there, so that's how supportive they ended up being, which is crazy because, like you were saying, you would think that since you and I, didn't go into even close to the big four.
Exactly.
I mean, I didn't go to college either. So forget it. The big four for me was, that's not even close, I was way, way away from that. So yeah, I lucked out, man. I think I got, this is a bold statement, but I'll say it and hopefully they'll hear it when they listen to this. I think I got the coolest Indian parents on earth.
You probably did, because I'll be honest with you, up until about 5 years ago, I'm still going to law school, apparently, to my mother. I'm supposed to be going to law school.
So when are you going to get a
starts next
job?
fall.
I know exactly. When am I going to get a real job? She can.
Job.
Up until 5 years ago, I was still on my plan to go to law school.
Yeah. No, I believe it, man. It's very rare to have immigrant parents, especially Indian parents, because, it's kind of like the whole reason they moved here was so that, we could go to school, go to college here and get, quote unquote, real jobs and be professionals. I do consider myself to be a professional. I just don't wear a stethoscope or go to court.
Yeah, makes sense. Support like that is so important when you're talking about something like this, artistic. And I can really appreciate that. Maybe even being unusual for culturally that you would be supported like that by your family. But what was the thing when you were younger? You started playing when you were 10, you said. So there had to be a moment, a spark, something that happened prior to that. Did you see someone play? Did you hear a song? Bring me back to that childhood spark when you actually said, hey, I need to play guitar. I need to play music. This is going to be my life.
Right. There's actually a few key moments. I think probably the first one, and don't worry, I'll consolidate it. Basically, and Tushar, you probably remember this, all of you guys, early 80s, the era of sitting around with your cousins or your friends with the radio on. Everyone's got their own boombox, and you're making mixtapes.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? Yes. Songs come on the radio, and the first 20 seconds of the songs are cut off as you're trying to press play and record together. So doing that was kind of first exposure to, kind of pop music and Western music. My friend had come over also around the same time, maybe even a little earlier. If you could believe this, my 6-year-old friend had come over with the first Ozzy Osbourne solo album.
Wow.
And played it for me, and that was the first electric guitar I heard. I don't even think I knew what it was at first. It was just this sound that sounded amazing to me. And then flash forward to what I was talking about, hanging out with my cousins, making mixtapes, and then one of my aunts had cable, so that's where MTV came in. So I would say probably like 1984 when Jump by Van Halen was huge, watching that video. And, there's this guy who I didn't know at the time was going to be my hero, Eddie Van Halen. There's this guy up there and he's wearing a tiger striped jacket and leopard skin pants, and he's smiling from ear to ear. He's playing this crazy red and white guitar, and it just looked like fun, and it just looked like he was having a blast. So that's kind of when I was like, okay, I'm going to play guitar. That's where the lessons kind of started at 10, and then I did, to be honest, because of the teaching techniques of back then, I did end up actually getting bored and quitting for about a year. And then my 12th birthday came, and my cousin and her brother, who Tushar, you mentioned before, who you guys, went to high school together, to the same high school. He is actually 6 years older than me. So he was, I don't have any brothers or sisters, but he was like the older sibling that, kind of introduced me to all this stuff. So on my 12th birthday, he had his license already. David Lee Roth had recently left Van Halen and was on his first solo tour. So he and his sister took me to my first concert on my 12th birthday at the Meadowlands, which was the David Lee Roth solo tour, and he had a guitar player named Steve Vai.
Oh yeah,
playing with him, and he was an unknown at the time. Just this 26-year-old kid from Long Island. He'd been in Frank Zappa's band for a little bit, and he got the most coveted guitar gig on the planet, playing with David Lee Roth after he left Van Halen. So that is what I always consider to be the moment that, quote unquote, ruined my life.
Oh, geez.
Because, I'm 12 years old and I'm at this concert and it was just sensory overload. The lights and the sound, and Steve Vai is running around the stage playing guitar and people are chanting his name and he's talking with the guitar and the whole thing. And I think that if I had to bring it out to one moment, that was like okay, this looks fun. I think this is what I think this is what it's going to be.
So what action did that lead to? Like, what was that next step?
Well, at that time, like I said, I had actually quit guitar for a couple of years, and this ties in now to my current story of, all the stuff that guy kind of did for the first year when I was like 10 to 11 is the exact things that I do not do now. Like, it literally, I didn't know this at the time, but it was actually shaping my future in a way, because now I have like this kind of checklist of like, well, you're not doing what that guy did, are you? Okay, good. We're good. So the next action really was to start playing again. So that night, on my 12th birthday, it was like, okay, fine, this teacher wasn't cool, but I've got to do this. So I started playing again by myself. And then throughout the course of the next couple of years, I was just sort of, learning. There was a lot of new resources for guitar players coming out then, a lot of songbooks and things like that. A lot of the big guitar players that's when they started doing their instructional videos, which of course in those days were VHS, if you remember. And then when I was 15, I kind of decided like, okay, there's some things that I'm not getting. I want to go to the next level. I need lessons. So I ended up finding a great teacher in New Jersey. And he's the one who actually taught me basically all of the theory and technique and all that kind of stuff that, and that I ended up, retaining for all these years, and what I'm actually passing on to my students for the last, couple of decades, along with obviously adding my own stuff. So, yeah, I just decided I need to play, took lessons, and then the next thing, the next step to being a rock star is looking for a band. So that's what I started doing right after high school.
Before we jump to the band, and I can't wait to hear that, I'm just curious. You mentioned this great teacher in New Jersey. Who was the teacher? Is it a known name?
In some circles, he is. His name is Ed Furman. He's in New Milford, New Jersey, or he was at the time. I think he's in Dumont now. And he's only 7 years older than me, I think. So thinking back about it now when we met is kind of insane, because I was 15 and he was 22. But again, when you're 15, even someone in their 20s just seemes like they're so much older.
Right. My God, you're both kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's almost 60.
Yeah. So he was in a prominent heavy metal band from the area that had gotten some national recognition, done some touring, in Europe and things like that for some of the bigger bands. And he was just a great teacher, great guy, great player. And, he just had a very different style at the time, which was basically doing the opposite of what the original teacher that I told you about when I was 10 did. So like no music books, kind of all memorizing stuff. He actually asked me what I liked, what I wanted to learn, which again, I carried with me. That's the first thing I do with any potential student. Hey, what artists are you into? What kind of music are you into? That kind of thing. So he just taught me a lot of stuff that I've retained throughout the years that I use. And that's what took me to the next level of kind of saying like, okay, I want to do this as a career. And then of course the next super pivotal moment was when I was, I think right after I graduated, or right before I graduated high school, he had an overflow of students, and he said, hey, would you be interested in teaching the beginners? And I was like, I think 18 at the time. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, you could do it. And I was like, oh, okay. I never thought about it. So he's actually the one who had the confidence in me to get me started on that. And literally within a week of doing it, of course, the first couple of times I was nervous, and I was stammering, and I was like, I was 18, I was just a little kid. And within a week, I fell in love with it. And I was like, you know what, no matter what happens, as far as like a career in a band or whatever else I do, this is something that it's a feeling that you can't describe when someone wants to play a song that they like, or a part of a song or something. You show them how to play it, and then they practice it, and then next thing they know, they're playing it. And just the look of utter joy on their face, I know it sounds kind of corny, but it's true, to give someone
it's a gift,
that kind of happiness. Yeah,
it's a gift.
For someone to go, hey, I want to play this song, and now they can play
Absolutely.
it. So I knew right then, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, I knew pretty much 30 years ago that that was going to be part of my life for.
Let's take a pause right there, because this is an important time in your life. You said like from the ages of 15 to 18. This is all happening when you kind of rediscover lessons. You need to take that next step and go further with it. I guess my question is, this is where you're finding your sound as a player, and as an artist, right? And you're doing your shredding and you're, minding your P's and Q's with your theory and all that stuff. How many hours a day are you practicing at this point to get to that level from the ages of, let's say, 15 to 18?
More than my parents wanted for sure at that time. Let's say enough to not get my homework done those days.
That's fair.
Probably, yeah. I mean, like I said, as soon as I started going to Ed, he just opened up a whole new world of technique and theory, and just all of a sudden, I was starting to recognize in all the things he was showing me. I was like, oh, wait a second, that sounds like that solo from that song by Metallica that I love, and then I just got super, super inspired to, just kind of probably go a little bit overboard with it, but maybe not. I think, what's the rule? The 10,000 hours.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
you're looking for yourself as an artist. I mean, you have to put in the time.
Yeah. So I would say I started going to him probably when I was a sophomore in high school. So I think those first couple of years, I must have been doing at least 2 hours every day, if not more. And then my senior year of high school, I did a work study. So that enabled me to go to school in the morning, and then I did a half day. And at first I worked somewhere else, and then they let me do the teaching thing for Ed. And my high school, to their credit, actually, I believe, did give me credit for those hours for the work study so I could graduate. So, I mean, by my senior year, I mean, I was teaching and practicing. So I'm sure I was playing probably 4 hours a day. Easy, between the theory and the technique, and then trying to learn songs and parts of songs and all that.
Did you ever, I mean, obviously you come from a musical background. You talked about a moment ago that your grandfather, your grandfather's musical past. So did you ever at any point say to yourself, not only do I want to play, did you channel some of that, your musical bloodlines in that sense?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so. Unfortunately, the one kind of, tragedy that came out of it was he passed away super young. So I actually never got a chance to meet him, which would have been amazing to, even as a little kid, to be able to go to India and visit and talk to him and things like that. But my grandmother always, she lived with us during my high school years, funny enough, when I was doing all this woodshedding. So, she actually, the one who was in the bedroom next door that, a poor lady had to listen to me practice, Enter Sandman and Metallica 1,000 times. But you know what? She was totally into it. And when I was going through that thing of, inevitably, not only do you want to sound like your heroes, but you want to look like them. So when the long hair came in and hey, I want to get, an earring and I want to get a nose ring and all that, she was actually the one, when my dad was against it, believe it or not, she actually was like, you know what? Just leave him alone. He's an artist. Let him do his
I was
thing.
going to say, man,
Wow.
if your parents letting you go all the way and do that, that is amazing.
Yeah, which is, like I said, it's comical in a way because my dad, he was against it at first. Like, your hair's getting a little too long and, you're definitely not getting an earring. And then basically, when his mom was like, all right, chill out. He was like, okay. So it was funny because my dad, with his mom in the house, luckily, listened to her and just kind of chilled out and let me do it. In fact, another quick story is that my junior year of high school, the summer between my junior and senior year, I was thinking of going to this music school in Hollywood after I graduated, and they had a summer program. So I signed up for the summer program in the summer of '91 when I was 16 in Hollywood. So obviously my mom is mortified. She's like, you're not going to Hollywood when you're 16. And my dad was like, don't worry about it. He'll be fine. So if you can believe this or not, I actually signed up for this summer session in Hollywood. My two roommates, we were going to live in an apartment. My two roommates, we met them beforehand. And then literally June of '91, my parents, we flew to LA. They dropped me off at this apartment in Hollywood. And my dad was like, all right, we'll see you in a few weeks. And like I said, my mom was mortified. But my dad is just a super positive and just strong, like fearless person. So he kind of encouraged me to that, in that way. And he was like, yeah, you'll be fine. So that's, if you can believe that, my Indian parents dropped me off in Hollywood when I was 16.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
And,
I was going to jump forward from there to ask about your first band and how you got into it. But now I have to ask, what happened in Hollywood? Are there any highlights or key takeaways from that experience?
Stuff that you want to tell people that your parents may hear.
No, I was only 16. I was super naive and, sheltered, as we were, at that age. But no, definitely a lot of growing experiences. The first time I was ever away from home for that amount of time, I was living with one 18-year-old roommate, one 21-year-old roommate that we obviously ended up becoming good friends. They were great dudes, totally looked out for me, because I was the kid. But yeah, man, it was cool. I mean, remember, it was the early 90s, so the 80s heyday of the Sunset Strip in LA was still kind of on its last legs, but still there. Got to go to the Troubadour and the Roxy,
Oh, wow.
Famous clubs where, all my heroes had played. Went to some great concerts, met up with, at that time, that school was super hot. And so I got to meet players from all over the world. And along with the musical education, I would say the most important thing that came about was that I actually figured out that I did not want to go to that school after graduation. I actually figured out that LA was actually not for me.
Interesting.
And so the main purpose it served was me deciding that I'm going to stay here in the Northeast and I'm just going to teach and I'm going to try to find a band and, do my thing.
Which sort of, comes back to the name of our show, No Wrong Choices. You went out there, you had that experience, so you learned from it, and even though it didn't necessarily lead anywhere, you picked up a really important lesson, which was that was not the place for you.
Correct.
So you come back to the Northeast. Tell us about getting into your first band and what that process was, how you met everybody. Just take us through that journey.
Sure. So this would have been the end of 1998, I want to say. This was still at the infancy of the internet. So if you guys know the famous newspaper, The Village Voice.
Yeah,
Of course.
So
we're all New Yorkers. Absolutely.
Right, exactly. So you guys know the deal. So this was right, I think, at the very beginning of villagevoice.com. The first sort of couple of years or so that you didn't have to do just a print ad, you could do an online ad. So I put an ad online, did the typical thing you hear of everyone in a band, guitar player with, influences, whatever, looking for a band with whatever. So, typical process you hear about with everybody. Got a lot of calls, I met a lot of people, a lot of good people, a lot of bad people, a lot of weird people, starting to lose hope. And then one day I got home. This was still in the answering machine days. Had 40 messages on my machine. And I think the very last one was this guy left a message saying, hey, I just relocated from Florida with my brother. We have a band already. We're looking for a guitar player. And we have a development deal with a songwriter named Desmond Child.
Oh, is that all?
I immediately knew who that was. I'm sorry.
I said, is that all?
Yeah, exactly. So Desmond Child is a songwriter, a legendary songwriter that written for, rock bands, everybody from Bon Jovi, Kiss, Aerosmith, all the big Bon Jovi songs he co-wrote, everybody from Cher, Garth Brooks, you name it. So I immediately knew who he was because that's the kind of music I grew up on. So I was like, oh, okay. So basically they were in Miami and had a different version of their band. The singer in the band had interned at Desmond. Desmond had just started a production company. So the singer had interned with him. Desmond had recommended you guys should move to New York to find a band and, live and get some experiences so you have, things to write about. How can you be a songwriter if you have nothing to write about, right? So I had met them there. We had similar backgrounds. Their dad is a doctor. My dad's an accountant. So we grew up, sons of immigrants and all that. So we clicked right away, started writing songs, and boom, the three of us were the core of that band that was together for 15 years. And then we had a few different bass players throughout the years, but those two brothers and I were the core from 1999 up until 2014.
And what was the name of this band?
Eve to Adam.
And How successful was Eve to Adam?
It's all relative, man.
Right.
I look at it as there's a huge span of what you consider success. There's the bands that play at bars for 20 years, and then the other echelon is Metallica.
Right.
And there's everything in between. So it's all relative. I would say we got further than probably most bands do. We had a few record deals. We made some major label albums, did a lot of opening tours. We opened up for Creed, when they did their original reunion tour in 2012. Got to play arenas, Beacon Theater, Chicago Theater,
amazing,
legendary venues. I got to, through that, I got to meet, basically my hero, through them, through a connection. I would say the furthest we got as far as commercial success was in 2014. The last album that I made with them had a single that made it to number 14 on the active rock charts.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty, again, relatively good. It's, again, when you having that happen is kind of a double-edged sword, because obviously it's amazing that you got that high. But at that point, the issue becomes when you get close to the top 10 in any kind of chart like that, that's when you're competing with the big boys.
Right.
Black Sabbath had put out an album that year. Alice in Chains, just all these iconic heavy rock bands had put out albums. So all of a sudden you're competing with them. And then that's really when the hard part begins. So, we got that song up to number 14, then sort of lost momentum. And then we did another single. It didn't do well. And then that's kind of when, it was clear to me that unfortunately, I gave it a great run. I gave it my all, no regrets, no wrong choices. But
Yep.
I think that this is the choice. This is the time where it's like, you know what? I don't. If we get a song up that high, and it's almost impossible to get past that when you're competing with the big guys. And so that's when it was kind of clear, like, okay, unfortunately, we're just not going to have the momentum. The way I look at it is, there's a speed bump, right? We got to the top of the speed bump and we just couldn't make it over, and we kind of rolled back to the other side. And when that became obvious to me, I made the very, very difficult choice of saying, you know what? I think, it's time for me to move on.
Okay. What was describe the sound of Eve to Adam a little bit?
The modern term would be active rock, basically song-oriented heavy rock. Just song-oriented music with, guitar riff-based. Had a great singer. He was a great melody writer and lyricist as well. So yeah, I mean, everything I did with that band, I'm super proud of. It was definitely in the vein of, the 80s and 90s music that we all grew up with. So a combination of the, Guns N' Roses and Van Halen, along with the 90s Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and all that. So, so I would say, if I had to describe it, melodic song-based heavy rock.
So you toured with a major rock and roll band. I mean, in a time when things were a little kind of kooky and crazy. Any backstage hijinks you can possibly share with our audience, or is that for the biography that you're going to write later on?
I think that's for the behind the music. But the one the one story definitely I'll tell, which was kind of I'll tell you the most surreal moment.
Sure, please.
If that's a good thing. So in 2012, Creed did a reunion tour called the 2 Nights Live Tour, where they were going to play every night, every town 2 nights. Obviously, that's the name. And they were going to do, this was, remember in the era where it was like, we're going to play our first album top to bottom on the first night and our second album top to bottom on the second night. So they were doing that, which was very cool. So we were lucky enough to get the opening spot for them. So that's where we played the Beacon and Chicago Theater, and it was just like an amazing, theater and arena tour. So the guys in Creed, besides the singer Scott Stapp, the 3 instrumentalists have a band called Alter Bridge. And Wolfgang Van Halen, who was Eddie Van Halen's son, was a big fan of Alter Bridge and had become friends with the Creed guys. So that's the backstory to how we ended up in Kansas City. on the same night as the 2012 Van Halen tour that was going on.
Oh boy.
So neither band could go to the other show. So Wolfgang said, hey, why don't you guys, and when he said you guys, he meant the Creed guys, why don't you guys come to Soundcheck? And we can hang out, and then you guys can go do your show, and we're going to do our show. So there was one night where the Creed tour was at the theater in Kansas City, and the Van Halen tour was at the arena. So the rest of us hear about this going on, that the Creed guys are going to the Van Halen Soundcheck, and I'm like, oh, man. So if you can believe this, it was going to be laundry day. So I was literally in the bowels of this theater in Kansas City folding my underwear.
Oh, that's very funny.
When the drummer in my band, Alex, runs in and he goes, hey, man, one of those guys doesn't want to go. If you could believe that. One of those guys doesn't want to go to the sound check. Mark asked if you wanted to go. And I'm standing there with my underwear in my hand going, was that a real question? Yeah, I want to go. So I literally have I hadn't even done my laundry yet. So I literally had my dirty post-show drawers in my hand. I dropped them, and literally 30 minutes later, we were walking into an empty arena, and I look up on the stage, and there's Ed Van Halen, his brother Alex, the drummer, and Wolfgang.
Oh, my God.
And
incredible.
This happened within the course of half an hour. Underwear, dirty drawers in hand, to Ed Van Halen waving, going, hey, guys, what's going on? So I got to go to a Van Halen sound check and see just the three Van Halens play and sing without David Lee Roth, because he was back at this time. And then after the sound check, Ed Van Halen came down, shook our hands, did the whole thing. And then Wolfgang said, hey, come, why don't you come back, come back in the dressing room, and then we'll go to my bus and hang out, because they all, of course, they had their own tour buses. Yeah. So we were back in catering, and there's all this amazing food out, and I'm standing there, and I feel a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's him.
It's Eddie Van Halen.
It's Eddie, and he's got a cup of beefaroni in his hand and a spoon. And he says, do you know where the microwave is? And I obviously, I'd like to think in my mind that I said, sorry, man, I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure it probably more was like, oh, Mr.
Your 11-year-old self comes in.
Yeah, so that's probably what happened. I'd
funny.
like to think that the first thing that I described happened, but I still don't know. And it blew my mind because there was all this amazing catering there. I mean, obviously, he was backstage at a Van Halen concert. And he just wanted a cup of beefaroni.
Chilling on the beefaroni.
That's fantastic.
Chilling on the beefaroni.
He could have had anything. He wanted the beefaroni.
Yeah, I was like, this is crazy. I grew up on beefaroni too. So, unfortunately, like I said, we were playing the same night. So we did not get to, see the show. But that, I would say if I had to pick one surreal moment, that would be it. Like dirty drawers in hand to Ed Van Halen tapping me on the shoulder, asking me if I knew where the microwave was so he could heat up his pre-show beefaroni.
That is an incredible story, and I can tell you right now, when we write the show description for this episode, the Eddie Van Halen beefaroni story will be referenced, without a doubt.
He's a regular guy like you and me.
And that was the thing. And the other thing is, when we walked in and he was on stage, they were testing the big video screens on stage. He made an off-color joke about that, which, again, I was like, this is great. He's an idiot like us. That's what I would have said. He's making off-color jokes about the Jumbotron, and he's eating beefaroni. It's amazing.
Awesome. So, looking forward from that experience, I imagine you've been working so hard to build up that band. You had some traction, you had some momentum, and then you needed to make that difficult decision of walking away. I mean, how difficult was it to do that? What are those emotions? And then what was next? Did you have a clear vision for where you were headed?
So, yeah, it was definitely very tough. It was like basically walking away from a 15-year marriage, because you put all your eggs in this basket and you've just been like laser focused, just sacrificing everything else. I've had, people laugh at me when I say this, but it's true. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. I've had 2 real girlfriends in my life, and neither one of them was local. I've literally never had a relationship with someone in New York or New Jersey. because for most of my adult life, I was just never in town.
Right.
Yeah.
We were just always making records and touring and doing something. So there was a lot of sacrifice for those 15 years. So it was very difficult. But I knew that's what I had to do. The plan was to teach. The plan was I'm going to stay back here in the Northeast, teach. Unfortunately, I really had no clue how to actually build a successful teaching business at that time. So I really didn't get any students. So for about a year, 2015, I was basically miserable here at home. And then one of my former bandmates and one of my best friends, Luis Espaillat, who's an amazing bass player down in Nashville, session player, live player, everything. He was actually the one. I had gotten tight with him when he was in Eve to Adam for about a year and a half. And he said, he called me one day and he said, well, you don't sound good, man. What's going on? And I said, well, I don't know what to do. And he said, you ever thought about moving to Nashville? And I had spent some time in Nashville because Luis, like I said, he was in Nashville. So believe it or not, there was a time when Luis was in the band that when you would have a tour bus to go on a tour, a lot of the depots are in Nashville. So long story short, we used to have our gear in Nashville. We found it was actually cheaper to keep the gear in Nashville, fly there and rehearse, and then leave from there as opposed to having the bus drive up to Queens to pick us up.
Right.
So I had spent some time in Nashville, and I was like, I don't know. He said, man, they're all the artists are looking for rock guitar players because every country artist is our age, and they all grew up on Guns N' Roses and Metallica. So they're all putting like this heavy rock sound. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. So I went down there, stayed with a friend for a few days, and just ended up really liking it and made the decision. Within 2 weeks, I put all my stuff in my car, moved down there. I rented a room in a friend's apartment for about 6 months. Then I got my own 1-bedroom, which was the same place that I left a year ago when I came back up here. So I was in the same place, never moved. And, I just completely shifted gears and just had to learn, do the cover thing. I'd never been in a cover band. I did my first couple of gigs. One of the female artists was kind of annoyed with me because I didn't know how to play anything. She was like, well, we're going to play Honky Tonk Woman by the Stones. And I was like, okay, I know the song, but I don't know how to play it. And she kind of almost scoffed. And she was like, how do you not know how to play that? And then, of course, I bit my tongue. I was like, yeah, sorry, honey. I was in my own band writing my own songs.
Yeah. It's like music shaming you.
Yeah, which you aspire to do one day.
Yeah, she was totally cover shaming.
Cover shaming,
so
yes.
I had to learn all this music from scratch to do, in the beginning, do some cover stuff with these artists. Then I ended up playing with a couple of original country artists, which was amazing. A really great friend of mine in Nashville, Chris Nix, amazing guitar player, let me sub in for him with an artist that he had been playing with because he couldn't do a tour. And then that started the ball rolling. So I started learning, original, music by country artists. I had to switch gears, cater my sound to that, a little bit of my playing style. And then for the last 4 years, I ended up in a really great pop band that did, events, like corporate events and things like that. So again, I had to learn a lot of originals and pop music. So basically, the time in Nashville was spent basically fish out of water, doing everything that I didn't really do in my teens and early 20s because I was trying to get in my own band and write my own music. So it's funny because I actually did it backwards. Usually you play in a cover band, then you form an original band and start doing your own music. I actually did the opposite. I started in an original band, and then when I was 40 and I moved to Nashville, I was like, oh my God, I have to learn 90 songs for next week because I didn't know how to play anything. And it was Nashville. It's not like they were going to play the Metallica songs and Van Halen songs that I knew growing up. So it was just, a great, great experience as far as just, like I said, just, throwing a musician into a brand new pool of water and going, okay, now you have to swim, basically.
Did that help to rejuvenate, let's say, your creative juices down there as well?
It did, because there's a lot of guitar techniques and sounds and concepts that are kind of, particular to country music, whereas they wouldn't be maybe for rock and blues and heavy metal or whatever you want to call it that I grew up on and that my band was. So, yeah, it was definitely inspirational to have the challenge of going, okay, well, I was in my own heavy rock band for 15 years, and now I'm going to learn and artist country songs, and I'm going to have to play them That first subbing gig I was telling you about was with an artist that the very first show I did in Nashville was, I think it was April of 2016. It was at a show down in Florida, basically in a stadium called Country Jam, opening for Rascal Flatts and a couple of other really big country.
Really? Wow, Rascal Flatts, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a full on trial by fire, of just like, being up there and playing, you're playing music, you're still playing guitar, you're still playing the same chords and things that you learned when you were 15, but it's a completely different, I would imagine it's like a chef, it's like, used to cooking Italian and then all of a sudden, okay, cook Thai food.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Still food, but a totally different type of cuisine. So it was, definitely inspirational.
So I guess I'll kind of lead me on my next question, which is, A, do you have a greater appreciation for country music? And then B, do you find now that there is, let's say, very little difference between genres of music, that now, because, let's say, all these musicians are essentially contemporaries now, they're all kind of your age, that basically all this kind of music now is all fused together? There's a fusion of music, right? As you said, like food, that we have fusions in food, there's fusions in music.
Absolutely. As much as I was talking about learning new techniques and sounds for country music, a couple of the artists I played for really, really picked me because when they found out about my background about playing, heavy rock in an original band, they were like, well, we want you to do what you did there, except in this context. So that was very interesting too, is that a lot of them didn't want me to cater my sound to a quote unquote country guitar sound, like, the old school kind of twangy kind of thing. They wanted like a big, like the one country artist, one of the guys I played for, he actually said, I want it to sound like Slash from Guns N' Roses playing in a country band. And I was like, okay, well, I can do that. I can look like that too, because when I grow my hair, you got a top hat? I'm there. So, a lot of them wanted that rock sound to be fused with the country sound. Just music in general, pop and country and rock, is actually getting a lot more simplified these days, right, especially like radio-oriented songs. So basically modern pop, what I found out, is basically pop music. The difference is, to me, the singing style and also the lyrical content. It's still more kind of about, being in the country and small towns and that kind of thing. So the lyrical content and the singing style is still kind of country, but the music is kind of, pretty simple, pop oriented, kind of colored with country. And a lot of people from Nashville will tell you that too, that like, the classic, back in the day country artists and songs, Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, all that. It's very different from, Taylor Swift and Kelsey Ballerini and what you would consider, Luke Bryan, any kind of modern country.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, there is a huge fusion of music. There's a lot of similarities. I would say there's more similarities than differences these days. There's even a genre of music that I think they call bro country. I don't know if that's a derogatory term, but it's basically like heavy metal country. Yeah. It's like heavy metal country, basically, where it's like big overdriven guitar sounds like you would find in Metallica, but it's country songs. A friend of mine from Nashville just got the gig this year with a country artist in such genre named Brantley Gilbert. And they're actually opening for Nickelback right now. So there's enough of a fusion where Nickelback, that's, a modern, hard rock, heavy rock, song-oriented band, they actually thought that Brantley Gilbert would totally fit into their show. And you know what? It does. Besides Brantley's singing style and lyrical content, it's basically two heavy metal bands playing. So yeah, I mean, it is really, fusing. I mean, Carrie Underwood is opening for Guns N' Roses these days on certain dates. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
crossover.
There's a lot of cross-pollination.
Yeah,
for sure.
So paint the picture for me. You moved to Nashville. You're doing all of these gigs. I mean, are you supplementing with students? I mean, how are you putting food on the table? Obviously, you're getting this gig here and that gig there. I know there's a bunch of musicians out there who are wondering how to piece together a career. You're doing this freelance. You're doing it because you're gifted enough and you know how to do it. But how are you? Obviously, you're making connections and one gig leads to another. But paint the picture for us. How would one go about playing gigs every night, maybe doing some session work and teaching and other things like that, and kind of piecing the whole thing together so you can have an active career?
Well, for me in the beginning, LYFT.
Yeah.
I was a Lyft driver.
Okay.
So basically when I moved to town, I mean, I had a little bit of money saved up. I was basically driving Lyft, making connections, taking gigs wherever I could, the typical thing. So basically starting over, that's where I got the gig with the female artist I was telling you before that was cover shaming me. So I just took anything, to make a little bit of money and make connections. And then I think in April of that year, I lucked out because my friend Chris, who I referred to before, I'd become good friends with him. He was really welcoming and supportive. And he said, hey, I play with this artist. He's doing a lot of shows over the summer, but I have an offer from another artist that I want to do. So why don't you sub in for my original artist? And I said, great. So I met with the artist. He was kind enough to let me do the gig. So I had to, that was the first artist where I had to learn all his original music. So it wasn't a super busy schedule. So it was those gigs and then driving Lyft. And then, slowly but surely, he started getting more gigs. And then I started playing with another artist who had a few more gigs. Then I started teaching again. As far as the session work goes, I never was really able to get into that world. There's a lot of great players down there, and there's kind of a group of people that do it. It's real difficult, for better or worse, to get into that group,
right.
To be let in. So that never really materialized for me. And then I would say in 2018, when I joined the event band, that's when it changed, because not only did they become very close friends of mine, who I'm still in touch with all the time, they were busy. They had just relocated from Miami to Nashville, and they wanted to work. So we had gigs on Lower Broadway at the Honky Tonks. There was one venue that would let us play because we weren't a country band. So we were playing pop and Latin and R&B and dance music, basically. So we were traveling a lot. In 2019, I think I spent almost every weekend in Miami because they were from Miami, so they had a lot of contacts. It's a great band called 30 Vice, I'm referring to. And so that's when I didn't have to do Lyft anymore. So basically from 2018 until I left last November, that's when I was playing in that band and teaching. And that's when my schedule was getting kind of crazy in the opposite way, where it was like I was teaching 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, we would be flying or driving somewhere to play. So there was about, I would say, 5 or 6 months in 2019 where I didn't have even one day off. I'm not complaining. It was a good thing.
You were a working musician. You had to do your thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, if you want to make a living and not doing anything else, that's the working musician gig. You better like playing your instrument.
Right.
You better like setting up your gear. You better like hotels. You better like planes. You better like airports. And, if you're too attached to pooping in your own bathroom, this is not the gig for you.
So you were in Nashville. You did that for a few years. And then what did you pivot to? You mentioned you have to love being on the road, love that schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Do you still love that? Did that start to get old? Where did your mind and your heart start to go?
Yes, sir. It did. It did. That was kind of what I started figuring out probably 2019, around the time where it was like 6 months where it's like, okay, dude, you should not be, I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, you should not be complaining. You wanted to get paid to play your guitar. That's what's happening. How dare you think any negative thoughts? But the other side of my mid-40s body is saying, what are you doing? You can't do this much longer. Right. Because you also have to remember, when I was in my band, this wasn't what we call a weekend warrior thing.
Right.
When you're out on a tour in a rock situation, opening up for a band or whatever, you're just out at sea for months at a time. So don't forget, I had 15 years of tour buses and bands and planes already before I even went to Nashville. Right. So now we're talking those 15 years plus the 7 in Nashville. So for the last couple of years, it was just starting to be like, I have to check into my flight.
Yeah.
I got to call my Uber to go, and then if you remember after COVID, the airlines, everything was chaos. A lot of the workers didn't come back. So it was like flight, to this day, every day I wake up, I'm scrolling on Instagram and one of my friends is trapped somewhere.
Still a mess. Yep.
Still a mess, So for a couple of years, it was kind of like, okay, I'm starting to not enjoy this as much. I love playing. I love my bandmates. They're great friends. So it was not like a person thing. It was just, I've been doing this for, 2 decades now, basically, So that's when I started sort of going, okay, well, what's the second half of my life going to be in music? So that's when, of course, the teaching thing comes into focus. And it's like, okay, well, for the last couple of years in Nashville, I kind of had this plan of, I'm going to build up my students, and then it's going to get to a point where if I have enough students, I'm going to be able to cut back on my live work and then just not have to do my live work anymore. So I really lucked out because I timed it pretty well. Of course, I was going to now have to leave another project with friends who I'd become attached to, that I spent so much time with. We were like family, still are. So I don't want to screw them over. So, I got to give them notice. I'm going to help them find a replacement for me and do that whole thing. So that whole process took about a year. And then luckily the timing worked out very well where they found, we found a replacement for me. We found a great guy, great player to be in that band. They weren't going to, I didn't want them to have to miss any work or cancel anything because of me. And they didn't have to, luckily. And also luckily, all of my in-person students in Nashville agreed to switch to online because we had already done that for a little bit during the lockdown.
Oh, wow.
So they were like, okay, that's fine. So I really, really lucked out because the timing worked out where I quit the project I was in smoothly with a replacement in place, so not screwing over my friends at all. And I went home last year with about 18 students, all online. And then I've built it up to, having, I have about 27 people now and 3 of them do twice a week. So I'm actually doing 30 I'm doing 30 lessons a week at this point. So I can maybe take a few more and then I'm going to, hire more people. And then, like I said, the next step is YouTube channel and doing a course and, all that kind of stuff.
All right. So I guess you kind of scoop my next question. So like, what is Gaurav's School of Rock supposed to be?
It's going to be eventually, basically, it's funny you say School of Rock. Yeah, exactly that. Basically, it would be great to have, a school that has an actual brick and mortar location
right.
as well as in person and online. Right now, I'm only doing online. But, as far as like being able to, do like what School of Rock does, make bands with the students and, do performances and all that, that's the dream. That's the goal. I mean, I'm in the infancy of that. But that's the plan. But like, again, lucky for me, I have almost 30 students and basically, I'm doing it, from home. Literally I'm sitting in the room right now where I teach and it's a great thing because when you do it online, you don't have to worry about weather. You don't have to worry about if you're a little bit sick, you can still do the lesson. It opens up my schedule because I'm not telling people, hey, sorry, I can't do such and such day and time because I'm going to be driving from one lesson to the other. So there's just a lot of, advantages to doing it that way. So yeah, I mean, that's really the, like I said, the next step is the school and in person, online, brick and mortar, hopefully, my YouTube channel, I'm going to start posting soon. And that's going to be kind of the, research for lack of a better term on what my guitar course is going to be.
Right. All right. So I got to, so then, this show is all about advice, right? The show is all about advice for those who want to try to get into the line of work, right? And you've painted a pretty good picture, right? Is that you've got to really put your heart and soul into it and understand that there are sacrifices to be made. So if you have one piece of advice that you want to give to someone out there who says, I want to be a musician, no matter what, my entire being, everything, I'm going to put everything into it to be a musician. What is that one piece of advice you have to tell them to say to a soon to be starving artist out there who wants to follow that path and be a working musician?
If I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be you cannot do it for the money or for fame or anything else than the fact that you cannot picture yourself doing anything else day to day. Because how many people would you say want to be professional musicians? In the hundreds of thousands, maybe even the millions?
I would say millions, yeah.
In the millions. It's first and foremost, the ground level goal that you have to be happy with is making a living as a musician. Anything after that is basically a bonus. And I've had so many of my friends experience that because there's so many highs and lows. The night that I got to take my dad up on the stage at Mohegan Sun Arena and look out at an empty arena, I was on top of the world. It was like, wow, this is amazing. This is only going to go up. I've made it. I'm on my way. And then next thing you know, I'm in Nashville, trying to find where the Grand Ole Opry is to take a tourist to a show there from the airport.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ups and downs. And so you have to, just be realistic and know what you're getting into. I would say that's the main thing. Know what you're getting into. Know that it's going to be, like you said, a lot of sacrifices. You're going to sacrifice family events like I did for 2 decades. You're going to sacrifice relationships. Like I said, I've literally had 2 relationships, never with someone in New York. And it's virtually impossible. Maybe it'll happen now, by now that I'm actually stationary in one place. But I would say you just have to know what you're getting into, and it's got to be because you love music so much that you literally cannot picture yourself doing anything else, and you're okay with paying your bills and playing music every day. You've got to be okay with that. If that to you is failure, then you're going in with, my opinion, the wrong attitude, because even that's hard. It's very hard to even just make a living only doing music.
Does the road still call to you sometimes? Do you ever feel that pain, that pang to go back out on the road?
Not yet. not yet. I am completely thrilled to be sleeping in my own bed, using my own bathroom every day, going to family events, going into New York City. It's just it's one of those things where, like, you look back in the last 20 years of your life and you just, I go, wow, I really haven't been able to do this century. I joined that band. Basically, we were up and running and out the door on the road hustling, let's say 2000, right? And I just really got back to town last November.
Man, oh man.
So
incredible.
My entire adult life was some sort of either writing or recording or traveling. And then, of course, when I was living in Nashville for those 7 years, maybe visiting home once every couple of, twice a year or so, missing out on so much stuff. So will I miss it at some point? I'm sure I will. I think the other kind of long-term dream goal is that if I can get all these all these other businesses that I'm so excited about up and running, I can maybe step back a little bit, from maybe only keep a certain amount of serious students and maybe do my own original project again, because definitely the answer to your question about the road, am I getting that bug yet? No. But am I getting the bug to start another rock project and write some amazing songs, hopefully with some amazing people, and record them and put them out into the universe? The answer to that question is yes.
Well, Gaurav, for those people from the road who might miss you, or people from Nashville who might miss you, or those people who would like to meet you for the first time, how do they find you?
Well, my teaching site is allinmusiclessons.com. My artist site is gauravbali.com, GAURAVBALI.com. And of course, Instagram, my teaching Instagram is All In Music Lessons. And hopefully, Gaurav Bali, I'm going to start doing more as far as YouTube goes. I'm finally going to make time to start really, diving headfirst into that as well, very soon.
Well, I know I can't wait to see it. I'm sure Larry and Tushar feel exactly the same way. And Gaurav, this has really been a remarkable conversation. It's very inspiring hearing from somebody who is an artist who gave everything to their craft and followed it through and has, had the opportunity to gain perspective, real life experience, and turn all of that into something special that might be, a little bit different. So, Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys so much. It was a blast.
Well, first off, Tushar, thank you for bringing your friend to us. That was a great conversation. I think Larry, maybe as the professional musician, as somebody who gave a big part of their own lives to music, you are the ideal person to reflect on this coming out of that incredible story.
Yeah, it was an incredible story, and you could see the dedication, that he gave this his whole life. It's interesting when you hear an artist talk about being inspired at a young age and making the decision that they were going to play their instrument and become a professional musician, and they follow through with it. They see through it because, a lot of musicians, as he talked about, lose interest. You better love to shred day after day after day, because if you don't love your instrument, if you don't love the travel, if you don't love the gigging, the hard work, the piecing together a schedule, piecing together a career, which is exactly what he did in a really intelligent way, then you're not going to make it, because it takes a lot of perseverance and dedication. And his story is truly inspiring. I'm thrilled that we had a chance to talk to him today about it. And I do think that the other biggest thing I take from this is there's a real benefit to teaching in addition to playing, because you learn as much as a teacher showing somebody else how to do something. And, we talked about it being a gift, but it's a gift to yourself and it's a gift to the person that you're teaching. And it's a great way to supplement your entire profession. So musicians out there, any artist, don't just work on your craft. Teach others how to do it too, because it's rewarding, it's educational, and I loved this story. It was just really inspiring.
I agree. And as a music fan, it certainly deeply connected with me. And, typically we would go to Tushar next to it, the cycle that we have established over time. But, I'm jumping in here because I'm also a teacher. I have become a college professor teaching media technology, story writing, and those are the things that I did throughout my career. And I'm starting to, it took a little while, but starting to really enjoy what I'm doing and making those connections and having those conversations. So that really connected with me because I'm feeling it myself.
Oddly enough, when I was in high school, I did a program called Summer Music back at Bergenfield High School. And there just came a point where I stopped kind of playing my instrument, but what I continued to do with it was teach the kids. I continued to teach all the lower grades because that was what I really enjoyed doing, right? So I would stop trying to get awards and just decided I wanted to teach. I was really good. I was an all-county player. I was like an alternate for all-state, but I decided I no longer cared about getting awards and accolades. My reward was teaching these kids how to play. And
you need to break out that instrument. We need to hear some T Daddy tooting right now. I want to hear it.
I haven't picked up that horn in decades. I haven't played that horn in decades. My God.
Come on, we'll jam. I'll break out my drum set. You could get the horns going. Samuels, you want to hum along?
That'll be the final show of season 3. But you know what? But that's what Gaurav's talking about there, right? Is that it's in the name of his handles, right? All in music lessons, right? You have to sell out. You have to go all in. This is your life. Yes, you want to have a relationship with someone. They have to understand the instrument comes first. That is what it's always going to be. And if they can't figure that out, it's tough. Because you're going to have a lonely life in some senses. You have to come to terms with that. You and and the person you're with have to come to terms with that. And if you can deal with that and they can deal with that, well then you're probably going to go a long way. And if not, you're going to be on the road a lot and you're going to be, gigging for a long time and you got to figure it out because man, oh man.
Eating beefaroni.
Yeah. It's going to be beefaroni in a can and asking strangers where the microwave is. That's for sure.
Larry Shea, you stole my joke. That's exactly where I was headed to close out this program. I was going to say something along the lines of, and we have to find those magic moments such as Eddie Van Halen eating beefaroni. So anyway, with that, Gaurav Bali, thank you so much for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. We also thank you for joining us. If this or another journey story inspired you to think of a friend who could be a great guest, please let us know by sending us a note via the contact page of NoWrongChoices.com. As I mentioned off the top, please support us by following No Wrong Choices on your favorite podcasting platform while giving us a 5-star rating. And then last but not least, we encourage you to join the No Wrong Choices community by connecting with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X by searching for No Wrong Choices. On behalf of Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea, I'm Larry Samuels. Thank you again for joining us, and remember, there are no wrong choices on the road to success. We learn from every experience.